The finish to Knicks Sixers Game 2 was not only extremely entertaining, but also an out-of-control disaster for pretty much everyone involved. And from an officiating standpoint, the league should quite frankly be embarrassed. Now, before we get to the final possession, let's go back to the second to last possession of the game for the Knicks. This is kind of foreshadowing for how the end of the game is going to go. There's a crazy scramble. Brunson loses the ball. There's a ton of contact, maybe a travel, maybe a jump ball, maybe somebody called timeout. Then all of a sudden the ball ends up with Brunson. He gets up this crazy shot that gets this insane bounce and somehow goes in. If this shot doesn't go in, if there's a foul called on the scramble, if there's a travel called on the scramble, if someone called timeout, nothing that happens afterwards matters and just sets up one of the craziest playoff finishes we've ever seen. And now we get to the play of the game, right? On the inbounds, this is honestly just an officiating disaster. Step one, this is probably a push-off on Tyrese Maxey against Josh Hart on the baseline. I understand that it's the end of the game. Guys are just trying to get open. There's a ton of contact in this possession. I'm fine with them not calling this, but as we go through this, we're going to point out negatives for each team, for each coaching staff. This has to be mentioned. This is one of those things that definitely could have been called. Tyrese Maxey's trying to get open. Two-hand shoves Josh Hart out of the way. Then right after that, it gets even more egregious because this 100% of the time should have been called a foul on Jalen Brunson. He is grabbing the jersey of Tyrese Maxey as he's trying to get open on the baseline. And I understand that the official on the baseline side can't see the jersey grab, but the guy on the other side of the floor is looking right at this and decides not to call it. Everything that happens afterwards probably shouldn't have happened as a result of what is clearly an egregious foul before the inbound. Now, the interesting part of this as well is it's not just about the calls that were or weren't made. A lot of comments made after the game by Nick Nurse about how he was trying to call timeout and how that was handled by the officials. On this initial inbounds, Nurse is trying to call timeout before the ball gets inbounded, slightly before the ball gets inbounded. You can see him attempting to call a timeout, but the refs don't see it. The guy on the far side doesn't see it. The guy on the baseline doesn't see it. The guy that's out of the frame that is up there by Nick Nurse doesn't see it. And then as soon as Nick Nurse sees that they're actually going to be able to inbound the ball, he takes it back. He's like, oh, no, just kidding. I don't want a timeout. That one is probably fine. Now, yes, they could have advanced the ball to the front court, which means that they wouldn't have turned it over in the backcourt and ultimately given up an open three. So you could argue that they should have just called a timeout in the first place once it was clear that the inbounds was going to be kind of crazy. But he takes this one back, and yes, the refs could have seen it immediately, but just like with a timeout that we're going to talk about later, the reaction time from the ref would have had to be out of control for them to actually get this one, see it, and then call it. And then again, Nick Nurse takes it back and clearly doesn't want the timeout to be called. Then after all that, we've got the push off on the baseline. We've got the jersey grab. We've got the missed timeout call. Then Tyrese Maxey continues to get fouled, falls over. There's no call. There's no nothing. There's no foul call. There's no travel. There's no jump ball. There's no timeout called. Nothing. The whistle is just non-existent at this point in Madison Square Garden. All three of the refs are like, it's fine. Nothing's going to happen here. There's no whistle that needs to be blown. And I'm not even sure what the correct call is here. I mean, I know that Maxey got his jersey grabbed and then he probably got fouled here, but then he 100% traveled here. And then we have to talk once again about whether a timeout was or wasn't called. In my opinion, by the time Nick Nurse realizes what's happening and tries to call a timeout, Tyrese Maxey doesn't have the ball anymore. It is super, super close. And if you wanted to make this reviewable and go look at it via replay, he probably has the ball when Nick Nurse goes to call timeout, when he actually makes the signal. But again, the ref would have to have unbelievable reaction time to see Nick Nurse calling for a timeout and recognize that Maxey still has the ball. And to me, more realistically, this is a loose ball. There's no possession, and Nick Nurse starts losing his mind. He turns his back to the play, trying to call a timeout. And by that point, they definitely don't have possession of the ball. There's a couple of other guys that are trying to call timeout on the floor. Embiid kind of tries to call timeout. Tobias Harris on the other side of Nick Batum on the other side of the floor tries to call timeout. But ultimately, I'm okay with them not giving them a timeout here. It's probably a travel or a foul. Like at some point, a whistle should have been blown, but it just wasn't. And after all of that, after all the craziness, you could probably say there were 5 or 6 mistakes by the officials here down the stretch. That's one of the reasons why the Sixers are filing a grievance, which I don't even know why teams do that anymore, to be honest, because it never results in anything. After all of that, the Sixers still could have won a game. Dante DiVincenzo misses the first three, gets a wide open look off this and misses it. and nobody boxes out Isaiah Hartenstein. Embiid tries to block out somebody, even though obviously it would be ideal if he would box out Hartenstein. There's two guys on the other side of the floor. They both just watch him run to the rim. And so if you're a Sixers fan this morning, you're mad about missed calls, they should have called a timeout, all this stuff, that's fine. If you box out and you get one rebound, you're up 2 with 20 seconds left, and you still have a fantastic chance to win the game as you probably go to the free throw line. Like, yes, there were mistakes made by the officials, but at the end of the day, DiVincenzo doesn't make the first one. If he just makes the first one off this, okay, blame the officials, that's fine. Box out Isaiah Hartenstein, get the rebound, go make your free throws, and the series is tied 1-1. That's not what happens. Hartenstein gets an awesome rebound. Somehow the ball finds its way to Donte DiVincenzo, and the Knicks, in a span of 27 seconds, go from down 5 to up 1 and ultimately win the game. Now, this series is far from over. You're the home team. You're the higher seed. You're supposed to win your 2 games at home. But this is a massive, massive missed opportunity for Philadelphia because Embiid clearly is not right. He made some shots in this game and looked decent at times, but it's honestly getting sad game by game watching Embiid try and tough it out, try and play on a knee that clearly just isn't right. Maxey apparently was sick leading up to the game, but he was fantastic. I mean, him and Embiid together from a scoring standpoint did really well, but a lot of it was Maxey. He was creating, he was hitting threes. He was awesome. And this was, a back and forth game. You have a chance to steal one on the road as the lower seeded team. If Isaiah Hartenstein doesn't get this rebound, if some calls are made at the end of the game, if this crazy comeback doesn't happen, Philadelphia just has to win their home games in the series and they will advance to the second round. Like, that's what they were looking at. That's what 1-1 means when you're the lower seed. You steal one, you win your home games, and then you win the series. And this is just a massive missed opportunity for Philadelphia. And more importantly, I think in the long term for the series is I'm extremely concerned for Joel Embiid. I mean, it's one thing to say he's toughing it out, he's out there, he's trying to give it his all, and I respect the effort, but I can't imagine that he's even close to 60-70%. He's probably 40-50% out there, and I respect that he's out there trying to play, but like this is getting dangerous how poorly he's able to move. There's apparently something wrong with his eye as well. Like, he's constantly messing with his eye. He's covering his eyes in the press conference after the game, and this is just, it's almost too risky at this point for Philadelphia to continue to have him out there. I know you want to win the series. I know that this is literally your season, but like, if something happens to Joel Embiid long term, he's going to miss a lot of next year as well. And I think that's a situation we are fast and quickly approaching because of just how bad he looks from a movement perspective. And it's clear that even with as not healthy as he is, Philadelphia has a chance in the series. They should have won this game. They basically won this game, and Embiid played decently well. But again, it clearly isn't right out there, and it took a big Tyrese Maxey game. The series is far from over, but this is just brutal and an absolutely crushing loss for Philadelphia. And emotionally, it's going to be something that's really difficult to come back from as we move to Game 3. So at the end of the day, you can say what you want about the officiating, how the end of the game went, but there were plays to be made here for Philadelphia, and unfortunately, they just didn't make them. It doesn't change the fact that this was an unbelievable ending to a game, an awesome game to watch, and this series has been the most entertaining first-round series so far, by far, in my opinion, but a really, really tough ending for Philadelphia.